Kia ora te whānau, ko hori tuku ingoa. We are in the ahi right here, our political special at Parliament. Te kuru o te marama Jews. I don't know how they let us in today, bro, but we're here. Good to see you, my man.
Kia ora, kei konei tātou, kei te rua o te raiona, kei te whare paremata. Aira, no mātou te waimari e ko tai mai, te rangatira o tēnei whare, ara, ko Rawiri Waititi.
Kia ora tātou.
Nau mai e hika.
Kare anō ko kite i tētahi raiona i roti te whare. E ngeru noa.
Ngeru. Toko mahana ngeru.
E nui ngā ngeru, kare e raiona.
All right, bro. Well, welcome to the Portokatu. We just go slap straight into it. No stuffing around. And my first partai, obviously, we've all been at Te Matatini for the last week or so, and it's about haka and the political nature of haka. You know, we've seen it in the House. We've seen it outside of the House on the steps of Parliament not long ago. You know, what does haka mean to you, and why do we need it in the House? You know, to those people who kind of are out there that kind of potentially might get the eye roll when Te Pati Māori stand up and go, what does haka actually mean to you, and why do we need it in the House here?
Oh, well, first of all, I just want to acknowledge the Matatini, the week of Matatini. I want to just acknowledge the pōhiri. One of the greatest moments probably for me of any Matatini. My first Matatini was 96 in Rotorua. Yeah, that goes to show how young I am. I was 14 years old and gave a solo in the choral. Don't go looking for it.
We'll find it.
You can't find it. It was with a group called Te Kotuki Ki Waiparera. I just want to say that pōhiri was absolutely amazing. I think an experience of a lifetime, of a generation. You could see Taranaki, te kāhui maunga, reflected in all of it. And so if you look at the kāhui wairua and the poropitis, you could see them all in that pōhiri. You could see Te Whiti and Tohu, and you could see Rātana, and you could see Mere Riki, Te Mare Kura, you could see them all, Te Ua Haumene. And I just want to first of all acknowledge the pōhiri, because I think haka, when you invoke haka, it comes from a place of elevation. It's a place of elevation, not a place of disruption. Yes, there are disruptive measures to haka, but when you look at it in its natural settings, it's actually a really beautiful thing. And we've been using haka for a long time. And even in the Rongomo, if you ever look at what happened in Pātea, you know, they think haka is so aggressive, but even te mahi poi and wera tuahuatanga katoa, he mea atahu, haka is a beautiful thing. So it's like, if you say we're living in Aotearoa and it's tangata whenua, you know, and they say you can't use haka in certain spaces, that's like telling me to take my moko off, or telling me to, you know, to remove myself from who I am. And so Parliament is not exclusive to us as being Māori and being freely expressive of who we are. And so haka is not a thing of disruption. Haka is it's a natural form of debate. I roti te ao Māori. And those of us that are on the marae know we use haka to reinforce kōrero and also to tautoko that kōrero. We don't use it to disrupt when we do haka at tangihanga. It's not a disruptive mea when we use it at weddings and all those types of things. They are to elevate a kaupapa. And so when we do haka in the House, what we're doing is actually elevating our debate to a place where it allows our people to see us, to hear us, and to feel us in spaces they quite often don't. And for a long time, Parliament hasn't reflected te iwi Māori, and I think the big question is that standing orders, which governs this House, the law governs everybody else outside this House, but the equivalent of the law outside the House is standing orders. And I think the standing orders need to reflect more of our tikanga and to allow tangata whenua to be able to express themselves freely using those things. And it's Article 2, to be undisturbed of our taonga.
Kei roto tētahi ture e meana kaua te Māori e haka?
Kei roto i te ture e meana, i roto i ngā standing orders, e meana kare tare te disrupt ngā whakahaere o te whare.
So kei runga i te tirohanga te speaker, mena kei te disrupt te haka.
Kei te disrupt te haka i ngā whakahaere o te whare. And so koina hoki tā rātou aro, engari kia mātou i hara i te disruption. He ori te haka ki te kōrero a te tangata. So if you're debating he wetahi kōrero kei roto i te whare, ko te haka he ori te. He pera no te waiata. I runga i o tātou marae. ka whakarongo ki te kai kōrero, ka mea ana ngā kai waiata, ara te waiata, ngai tōki o na kōrero. Me he mea kai te kōrero mo te kotahitanga, he nui ngā waiata mo te kotahitanga, me he mea kai te kōrero mo ngā mate, he nui ngā waiata mate. So wera atu ahua tangata katoa, me he mea he whai kōrero e whakakipa i ngā kariaro tō te tangata kia haka, me hakaina. Ngā warino. So mena pirangi rātou te kite i tētai tauira, puta atu i te whare nei, whakaeke ki nui i ngā marae, kātai anō ka kite i ngā tikanga kā roa nei tātou e pupuri nei. E hia mano tau a te iwi Māori e mahia ni wēnei mai. E kāre he rarurari no te mea here ki te rangi ki te whenua.
And when you look at, especially after, obviously Hana's haka, I remember being in there and I nearly fainted. I remember coming out and talking to you like, bro, I actually nearly fainted, and you're like, same. Obviously, the public looking in, they're seeing more and more of this, you having waiata, singing, and it's a beautiful thing to see. And obviously the reaction from overseas is actually like, wow, look at this place where they're able to express themselves in this way. And I think the more that people see it, the more that people are actually being drawn to how it is, especially within a place like here.
It's empowering others too. So it's empowering other Indigenous peoples or tangata whenua or tangata taketake to be able to freely express themselves in these colonial systems. That haka, I must say, I've done kamate, probably all of us have done kamate all our lives, but I must say that day was a different feel to doing kamate with Ngāti Toa in the house, and for the reason it was performed. I've been doing haka in here, maybe nobody even remembers after Hana doing hers, but I've been, no gripes. Day one I did a haka in here. My day one I did a haka in here, and I did a haka in regards to swearing the oath. And right from day one, I was uncomfortable about just swearing the oath to the Queen of England at that time. Elizabeth was still alive, Queen Elizabeth was still alive. And I felt that the oath didn't reflect Te Tiriti o Waitangi. It didn't reflect iwi Māori. It was an oath to uphold the mana of Queen Elizabeth and her heirs. And that doesn't sit well with me because, Te Tiriti o Waitangi was that agreement between te iwi Māori, ngā hapu o Aotearoa and the Crown. And so it's not reflected in the oath. So I did a haka then. I also did a haka against the leader of the opposition at that time, not to mention any names, around some of the racist rhetoric she was using in the House at that particular time, and haka then. And so for me, again, being brought up on the marae, being brought up in my tikanga and te ao Māori, it is an actual natural thing for me to do, without a second thought. It's not a thing that I go, I'm going to plan this, or I'm going to build courage to do a haka, and I just want to do it because I...
Sometimes not even maybe strategic. No. It's like
well, if you ever talk to Debbie, quite often she'll go, how did that come from? And quite often she's caught up in the back going, what is going on here? And that's because when you're naturally brought up in a space like this, and those natural things come to you, it feels comfortable for me to be able to support the argument that I'm putting through to the House and into the debate, and to express myself using the tools that have been given to me, and the tools that I've learned. So my thing is the standing orders need to reflect more of the tikanga of te iwi Māori, so we can see ourselves reflected in this house, the very house that our tipuna consented to. You can't say that this house was built in isolation to our people knowing exactly what they were doing. They consented to this house being built, and for kāwanatanga on this whenua, what they didn't consent to was that we ceded sovereignty to anybody, and so we should be able to come in here and freely express ourselves, to be undisturbed of our full and exclusive rights, to be able to express ourselves and to use every taonga we have, and that we have been bestowed the honour of upholding and actually bequeathing, is that the word? To our mokopuna. That's a silly word, bequeathing. It's a marvellous word. He mea tuku. Tuku iho.
During the hikoi, there were many haka, and obviously the hikoi showed up on the steps. And the reason why we've waited to do another podcast afterwards is to kind of have all the reflections from the hikoi, Waitangi, Te Matatini, obviously. Do you think the coalition realised, with the actions that have happened in the last year or so, how Māori, so many Māori, are becoming really politically aware? Do you think they actually realise how massive that effect would have had on the country?
I think they underestimated. They underestimated the impact that bill would have on our people, and that's not the only bill. There's a whole lot of other bills coming down. There's a regulatory standards bill. There's another bill that New Zealand First is moving, which removes the treaty from 28 pieces of legislation. And so, ka matara tātou, and that the treaty principles bill is only the beginning of the onslaught. And if we see what the government has done in 16 months, undoing 40 to 50 years of development here in this country, our people are ready. And so as we mature in the political landscape of Aotearoa, you can see that with the biggest hikoi that this country has ever seen. And people are trying to play it down to 30,000, 40,000. The train station said that they had 40,000 just pass through the train station. And so if you look at it from that perspective, and the tail of this hikoi was still over at Waitangi Park when we already had started the whai kōreros here. It was easy to see that there was around about 100,000 people here marching on the doorstep of Parliament. And so they underestimated the power of our people, not just Tiwi Māori, but tangata tiriti. I looked around that crowd and there was a ton of tangata tiriti out there. Tangata moana, our Palestinian whānau were there, and it was a collective voice of not just Tiwi Māori, but a collective voice for not just treaty justice, but social justice and Indigenous justice. And we showed the world that, collectivism and fighting these things together will ensure that, that kāre tēnei taura here i a tātou, ne? Ko te taura here i a tātou, ngā kiri waiwhero o te ao, kei te here tonu, mai te rangi ki te whenua, engari kei te here, te pito tangata. And so, we've seen the united efforts of Indigenous peoples all over the world, and not just here. I saw the one over in Perth, I saw the one over in Melbourne, over in England, over in America, over in Rarotonga. And so people were standing up everywhere in solidarity with treaty justice here in Aotearoa. It was beautiful, eh? What an amazing...
tāhua.
Tāhua.
Hey, te kōrero koe mo te haka, kōrero kōrua mo te haka, and activating our people, and we activate naturally. I kōrero koe mo te pōhiri I Taranaki. One of the interesting things to me that day, because there were a lot of us, hey Isaac, we were all geared up for a haka, and we didn't actually haka out the front here. And Hana led that waiata, and it just really gave that different layer of I whakarangatira anō ia I te rā kia eke ki tētahi taumata tike atu. Tiki anō, and I think I wasn't expecting it because I was there, I was all fired up, and then it didn't pacify, but he just tau te Māori I roto I te minenga, and I whakaro au he mea tino Māori tērā, ko tana wairua I kaua I tērā, hea o whakaro ki taua, he au orite ki te pōhiri tāu e kōrero nei, taha wairua.
E tika tonu, me rongo koe I tō puku. Me he mea ko tō puku e kia nei, me haka. Me he mea ko tō puku e kia nei, me waiata. And kuna hoki te pai a te iwi Māori, me naka whakarongo ki tō puku, ngā ware ake te kaui wera atu a huatanga. No te mea kāre no ko kaiapo I ngā mahara, I ngā tikanga, I ngā whakahaere, a ngā mātua tīpuna ki roto I tō puku. Tēnei waho o te tinana, me naka aro koe ki tō māhunga. Ahua makariri tēnei wahi. Ne, he wahi makariri tēnei. Ko te mahana katoa o whakahaere katoa kai roto I tō puku. Puku kata, puku riri, noho puku. Wera atu ahua tanga katoa, the engine room o te iwi Māori kai roto I tō puku. And it's the most uncolonised space of your thinking is your puku. So if you follow your puku, quite often it's right. But where the taupatupatu is when we tend to use this more, which is a very makariri space. And so kuna hoki tāku e meana, tautoko anau I te kawe a hana I te rā, I tērā o ngā rā, no te mea I whakarongo ia ki tana puku. Kia waiata, kia mō tētea, I tōna waiata. I runga tau I ngā haka, te haka a te wakahuia.
Tika.
E mea na katohe au. Katohe au ki te mana nāna whakatau rega I te tiriti o Waitangi. Wē rā tu ahuatanga kato ana. Tērā haka, hāngai tō ki te tiriti o Waitangi. And he nui ngā haka, eta. Kia roto I a tāo o Ngāti Pro. You know, te haka kiringutu. You know, atu tā niho. E mea na, you know, pō ngā rā katataki mai te whare o ngā ture kawhiria, te Māori kawhiria, ngau nei o na reiti, ngau nei o na tāke. Wera momo kupu kato hāngai tōki ngā mahi porotiki. No reira, karetare te āta wete I tēnei mea te haka me te porotiki. No te mea, he nui ngā tauira kai waho keake. I tēnei whare, I roto I a tāo te Māori, e meana, ka tare anu hoki te whakawahaina I otohe, ki roto I te haka. Anu hora I roto I ngā waiata. Ngā waiata atuini mo te kotaitanga, he mea no tērā e wero nei I ngā mahi whakaparako a te kāwanatanga.
It's an exciting time ki au nei, kei te kite I te hikaka o te iwi Māori, kei te rongo I te hikaka, kua tino piki te Māori, especially after Matatini, the Māori was very strong.
Oh, ātāhua. But there is a movement happening. And the belief in our people. And I think over the last 5 years of my political career, I've just seen our people go from strength to strength and the empowering and the belief in ourselves to be able to come up with our own solutions, to be our own political voice and not to rely on legacy parties to save us. For a long time we've thought, Labour, National, all those types of legacy parties that will save us actually have done huge damage to our people and continue to damage our people. And I don't see a differentiation between the both. What I do see is that our people are rising more in this political space. We're becoming more politically mature in this democracy, but also in the MMP system. Our people are believing in themselves, and without our voice, our own authentic, unapologetic, unseeded, unfettered, unbridled voice in this house, nobody else is going to fight for mana motuhake o rangatiratanga. And we're not saying we're coming down here to fight for it. No, absolutely not. We're coming down here to assert it, because that's what our tipuna promised, was the assertion of mana motuhake rangatiratanga. We're not asking anybody for it.
Let's look at the election next year. You have 6 of the 7 Māori seats. Labour's pretty much said that they're coming out strong to try and go hard in each one of those spaces. You know, Labour and Greens obviously probably going to need Te Pati Māori to form MMP. And we're talking about, these supposed bigger parties where Te Pati Māori has become quite a stronghold within that. And are you guys actually having kōrero already? Like, are chats happening already, or how does it even work for people outside of who even know what happens in here?
What we do know, I think, collectively, and they call us the left bloc, but we don't see ourselves as left or right. Te iwi Māori must never see themselves as left or right. If you look at a marae, at a wharenui, you see the left maihi and the right maihi. Te Pati Māori see themselves as the kōruru. Te koe te tapu o te whare ko te kōruru. And so we see ourselves sitting right in the middle there. And we should always be in a space where we're looking at, okay, how te oranga, how te mate. How te ora, how te mate, kei roto I ngā waho e rua. So having a look at what benefits do Māori have, whether there is a national government or a Labour government. At the moment, there's been no oranga in a national government. It's been absolutely diabolical. And so what we do know in the opposition is that this needs to be a one-term government, right? With this collectivism, National New Zealand First and Act, again, have done huge damage to the relationships that Māori have built in the kāwanatanga space and have taken us back 40, 50 years. We're not even at a level playing field. The level playing field was before they took office. And so in order to get back to that level playing field, because they've dropped the bar so low, our first 100 days is to raise that bar back to where it was, although it's still a low bar. In terms of our own development and our natural development, we need to get it back there before we can even progress to the next stages. And so we will work with any government that's willing to return that very low bar to where it was before, although still low, but incremental developments, and then from there continue the development and the progress that we were making before this government took place. So, in terms of your question in regards to whether there have been discussions, there have not been any official discussions, but we have talked to the opposition parties about how we hunted in regards to the Treaty Principles Bill. And so we had a bit of a rā about how we may be able to work together in that particular space, and I think we did, relatively well. All three have got the same type of thinking when it comes to the Treaty Principles Bill, is that it's a rubbish bill. And it's a bill that actually erodes the rights of tangata whenua here in Aotearoa, but it also erodes the rights of everybody here in Aotearoa, not just tangata whenua, but everybody, because the treaty protects everybody. It actually protects Aotearoa from international exploitation and corporate greed. And it's always stood in the road of a free market and international corporations coming in here to exploit Aotearoa. It always has. And so the only times we've gone to court is against the government or against corporations. And the treaty has been the backstop for those who think that Aotearoa is their playground.
Do you reckon this is solely the sole reason why they are picking away at it? Why this is to allow that privatisation come in and allow them come in?
Yeah, absolutely.
The single most simple reason why?
Absolutely. That's the single reason. And so they will use race as a distraction. They will use equal rights. They will use libertarian type speak as ACT does. And so what we've got to understand is this is not a race issue. The Tiriti o Waitangi is not a race issue, it's a rights issue. But it's also an opportunity for them to remove the Tiriti o Waitangi to allow for their economic agenda. And so they will use everything they can. And if you look at the yes vote over in Australia, they use Atlas network type propaganda, where they use words like elitist Māori. So they've started to bring these types of corridors. Hobson's Pledge uses it all the time, and it's an Atlas agenda where they start to create this elitist Māori. 2% of the country controls 50% of this country's wealth. Māori are not even in their 2%, so we don't know where the elitist Māori comes from. They gave, landlords a $3 billion tax cut and say that we're elitists, where treaty claims since they started have only amounted up to 2.6 billion. And so, even when South Canterbury Finance went down the Google a few years ago, they were easy to throw $1.7 billion to get them out of the poop. Just like that. Yeah. So they can just award money just like that, but we're the elitists. So they're using the agenda type, the Atlas agenda type rhetoric, because they used it over in the yes vote over in Australia, they used it in Canada, and they use it in America, and it's the same rhetoric. Elitist Māori, equality for all, and race. And so we just got to be very aware. And hey, look, the whakapapa is pretty clear too. Debbie Gibb, who was the chair of Atlas Global over in New York, is the daughter of one of the biggest donors for the ACT Party. So, and when we started to bring up the Atlas stuff, she resigned a week later. So, this is about exposing some of the stuff that we're up against, and this is what we're up against. Tiwi Māori, we're up against not just a national as in country national agenda here, but we're up against a global agenda. We're up against a global agenda, and so Te Tiriti o Waitangi protects us from that, and so we must protect it. And not just for Tiwi Māori, but everybody living in Aotearoa must know that Te Tiriti o Waitangi protects us all from international exploitation and corporate greed.
I think taku nei mōhio, because kua roa hoki au e tuhi ana i era momo kōrero, taku nei mōhio kei te matara ake tātou, a motu nei, a iwi Māori nei, engari a motu whānui, kei te oho ake tātou ki tērā mōhiotanga, ki tērā whakatau, this is actually, we're becoming more aware as a nation, I feel, it might be just some positive thinking.
No, I agree.
But I feel like everyone, especially Māori, are becoming more aware of, it's not just local antagonists, but we're actually suffering from something that's happening offshore as well.
Yes.
So the more we get able to consolidate our whakaaro around that and unify, me hoki anō ki rā kōrero ko taitanga, ka pai ake tā tātou koke. But I did have a pātai te kōrero koe mō ngā pire. We've talked about treaty principles, and you mentioned the regulatory standards bill. We had a huge response to the treaty principles bill, which we've already spoken about, and the regulatory standards bill. That was slipped in quite quickly afterwards, and we got quite a big number of submissions in for that as well. Engari, kei hea te rei nāne, mea ha tātou te iwi Māori?
It hasn't hit the House yet, so it's not in the House at the moment, but we have to be very, very acutely aware of what that agenda is in terms of the regulatory standards bill. And so that is very, it's actually really, it's probably more dangerous than the treaty principles bill, because it actually allows one man to be making decisions based on their regulatory standards, which will be absent of any tiriti o waitangi principles or even articles. And so hence why wanting to change the principles to suit the regulatory standards bill, which will allow them to have the free market, to allow them to remove the tiriti o waitangi from any barriers of development here in Aotearoa, even when it comes to drilling, the mining sector, and any other sector that feels like it wants to come and exploit Aotearoa. And so us down here in the Pacific is an untapped resource for kind of global development. And as we see the kind of the Americanization of Aotearoa, and I can say that quite freely because that's what I truly believe, is that we are turning in, there is a more kind of a liberal Americanizing of our country, free market, and wanting to remove any kind of barriers that have stifled, their developments. And so Te Tiriti o Waitangi hasn't stopped economic development, but what it has done is put protective measures in place to ensure that, first of all, you look after the whakapapa of Papatūānuku, you look after the environment, you look after the people, and that tangata whenua are not are not a afterthought, that we are forethought.
Do you think it was just a real strategic play? Do you think that obviously with the treaty bill that came in, everyone was like, what the hell? And then the regular standards kind of just slipped in without people even saying, do you reckon it was...
Well, it hasn't slipped in yet, and we've got time.
Yeah, there is time then.
But the thing is, this government hasn't said that they will not support the regulatory standards bill. My understanding is that this coalition government is going to be supporting the regulatory standards bill.
And it's my understanding that maybe Toitu Tiriti has got filed something.
And then the High Court, which is cool. And we need, I don't know, I can't make any comment on that. But we must use the judicial system at every way possible, because it's independent, right? It sits outside of government, it sits outside, so and that's why we have a judiciary. And so my thing to iwi is we've got to be up to the plate in regards to what the true agenda of this particular government is. But look, I'll tell you what, I was even wouldn't be so surprised but disappointed in the announcements of the opposition party last week. It was very light blue. They won't undo the patches, the gang patch legislation, the boot camps, all of these things.
We're talking about Labour here?
Yeah, they will keep all of the things, all of those things, 7AA, all of the things we've been fighting against. And I was quite blown away to hear that type of kōrero, because I thought actually we could have had a transformative coalition with in the next government if we want this to be a one-term government. And so we won't be deterred from our kaupapa. We won't be deterred by our kaupapa, but we need our people to continue to believe in themselves. We need our people to get into a space where let's not get caught up with first past the post type politics where there's only two major parties. This is an MMP democracy we live in, and it's an MMP system. and it gives us all a strong voice. And if you want an unapologetic, unseated, unfettered, unbridled voice in here, you got to make sure Te Pati Māori is a strong voice, and is the voice that will continue to fight for the assertion of our mana motu hake and our rangatiratanga.
Let's talk about the Māori seats. We had a little kōrero about it before we came in. You spoke about the trajectory of
Oh, yes.
of votes and people that are getting on the Māori roll. In terms of like, again, coming out and trying to be strategic, in some places, would it be smarter potentially for some Māori to get on the general roll, or is it always the play to be on the Māori roll?
Our people are understanding how the electoral processes work here in Aotearoa. The more our people, so we've had 7 seats, we made up 16% of the population. We had 7 seats because half of that 16% were on the general roll and half were on the Māori roll. That's the only reason why we had 7 seats. Now you just imagine if all of them were on the Māori roll, potentially we'd have had 14 seats, right? So it's based solely on population on those rolls. So it's not strategic for our people to be on the general roll, absolutely not. It is more strategic for our people to be on the Māori roll, not the general roll, be on the Māori roll to increase our participation here in this kāwanatanga space. Now, if the trajectory of the people who migrated over from the general roll and those who are registering onto the Māori roll straight off the bat stayed the same since with the hikoi, they're saying if that trajectory stayed the same, we would have 2 new seats. That's awesome, eh?
That's awesome.
And so for the first time ever in the history of the 2 electoral rolls, the Māori roll now outpopulates Māori on the general roll, which is a win for us. But if the trajectory stays the same in terms of everybody migrating over to the Māori roll, we will have 2 new seats, and those 2 new seats could quite possibly be in Auckland because that's where most of our population is, and it might mean some line changes. Yeah, it might need some line changes. I don't know what those line changes might be. It might end up being, you know, Āti Pro end up in the Wairiki seat. That would be awesome. And, you know, for me, I think Wairiki could be easily split into 2. You could have a Te Arawa seat and a Mātātua seat because it's those you know, mai ngā kuri a whare ki Tihiro, mai maketu ki Tongoriro, that's the electorate. It's quite an easy electorate to kind of break up into a Māori sense. So if there was 2-seat breakup, Tukuru could be the MP for Te Arawa, and you know, and I could be the MP for Mātātua. But you know, it's that type of thinking. And so if our people again continue to believe in themselves, and as we mature in this democracy, you know, we could be a powerhouse. We should be determining who is the government every election, and that's the goal.
Yeah,
that's the goal. Is that Māori believe in themselves? We're all on the Māori roll. We increase the seats here in Parliament, and we should be determining who the government is every election.